There is a question that baffles financial analysts and that very few manage to answer precisely. How does a government that is technically bankrupt, sanctioned by world powers, and has a multi-million-dollar bounty on its head, manage to generate enough cash flow to stay in power year after year? If you look at the official figures, Venezuela should not exist economically. And yet, there it is. Today, on Let's Talk About Money, we will not only tell you the story of a collapse, we are going to reveal the exact mechanism of the shadow economy that sustains the regime. If you want to discover the answer to this financial enigma, subscribe to the channel right now. The truth is hidden in the details.
To solve this mystery, we must first imagine a nation floating on an ocean of wealth. Imagine a territory with the largest certified oil reserves on the planet, more than 300 billion barrels. A country with gold, diamonds, and an enviable position in the Caribbean. That country is Venezuela. But today, the images we see are of hospitals without power and people fleeing. How did we go from opulence to misery? And more importantly, keep this question in mind. Where does the money come from today if the oil industry is destroyed? To understand the magnitude of the tragedy, let's rewind the tape. In the 70s, Venezuela was the Saudi Venezuela, a stable democracy with the strongest currency in the region. Giant highways and dams were built, but behind the shine, a silent disease was growing: addiction to oil revenue. The state received dollars and distributed them, creating a dependent society. When crude prices fell in the 80s, the illusion shattered, and the corruption of traditional parties paved the way for radical change. That change arrived in 1999 with Hugo Chavez. He promised to redistribute wealth and had historic luck. He lived through the largest commodities boom in modern history. The barrel went from $9 to $140. Venezuela received nearly $1 trillion, an astronomical figure. But here begins the first part of the debacle. Instead of saving, institutional destruction began. The first pillar of the disaster was exchange control in 2003. The free currency market was banned. This created the largest corruption machine in the hemisphere. The mechanism was perverse. Government cronies received cheap dollars from the state to import food, but brought in scrap or nothing and sold the dollars on the black market, earning billions. This is where much of the legitimate wealth fled. The second pillar was the attack on private property. Expropriated, he shouted on television. Lands, factories, and banks were confiscated. The result, everything the state touched went bankrupt. Venezuela went on to import 80% of its food. But the mortal blow was to PDVSA, the crown jewel. After the strike in 2002, Chavez fired 20,000 qualified technicians by blowing a whistle. They were replaced by political loyalists with no experience. Production fell, refineries exploded. Venezuela killed the goose that laid the golden eggs.
And this is where the math stops adding up. In 2013, Chavez dies, Maduro arrives, and in 2014, oil prices collapse. The country goes bankrupt. Hyperinflation breaks out, the bolivar disappears, and the salary drops to $3 a month. But remember the question I asked you at the beginning. If oil no longer makes money and the state is broke, how does the circle of power keep operating? Where did the funds for the military and the elite come from? We are about to reveal the answer, that financial black box that many fear to investigate. If you value this kind of deep analysis, subscribe to Let's Talk About Money and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss what comes next.
The answer to our initial question begins with the mutation of the state. As legal oil revenue dried up, the government didn't stop. It simply changed industries. It ceased to be an oil administrator to become, according to international investigations, a diversified criminal structure. Here emerges the Cartel of the Suns. Unlike traditional cartels that fight against the police, here the police and the military are, allegedly, the cartel. DEA and UN reports detail how Venezuela became the highway for Colombian cocaine to the world, using presidential airports and state ports. Drug trafficking became one of the new sources of liquidity that oil could no longer provide. But there is a second source of income, even darker and more direct, which answers how they get cash fast. Facing bankruptcy, Nicolás Maduro created the Orinoco mining arc. He handed over the south of the country and its jungles to mafias for the wild extraction of gold. Here is the answer to the paradox we posed at the beginning. How does a bankrupt regime survive? It survives because it replaced the formal economy with a shadow economy. Planes loaded with blood gold leave clandestinely for Turkey and the UAE, dodging international banking sanctions. That gold is exchanged for euros or dollars in cash that return to Caracas on private flights. This is how liquidity is injected into a dead economy. This is how military loyalties are paid and luxury stores are seen in a city where there is no water. It is not economic magic. It is the recycling of money from illegal mining and drug trafficking. The situation escalated so much that in March 2020, the U.S. Department of Justice put a price on Nicolás Maduro's head: $15 million for narco-terrorism charges. The president of a country became a wanted target on the level of drug lords. Today, Venezuela is an economic corpse artificially propped up by this circulation of illicit money and anarchic dollarization. More than 7.7 million people have fled, the largest exodus in the hemisphere, escaping not only poverty, but a hijacked system. Now you know the answer. Venezuela does not sustain itself by its oil reserves, which are useless today due to lack of investment. It sustains itself by a parallel and dark financial structure that has turned the state into a machinery of criminal extraction. We have solved the mystery of the financing, but the political history is still being written. How long can a shadow economy last before collapsing on itself? That is the next big question. If you want to keep understanding the real money behind the headlines, make sure you are subscribed to Let's Talk About Money. See you in the next analysis.